And I'd like to join the chorus of voices here thanking both of you for your public service. It's great service to this country and even beyond our borders. We really appreciate it. If I may, Mr. Duelfer, I'd like to start with you. I read in this morning's Washington Post, it said, quote, as head of the Iraq Survey Group, he worked independent of the CIA. Is that true? You worked independent of the CIA?
I'm an independent voice. I report to the Director of Central Intelligence.
Okay. And independent of the CIA, and his report was not vetted or changed by the agency. Is that true?
Other than for the declassification process, which I described earlier. I mean, I controlled the content.
Okay. So they didn't ask you to change it materially, just in terms of the classification aspect?
Correct.
And did anyone else ask you, outside the CIA, from another agency or the White House or anybody else ask you to change your report?
No, I mean, I received, thoughts, which I solicited from people because I think, anybody who has a bright idea, I'm not averse to hearing it. But, no one tried to influence the outcome. And if they knew me, they would, they would realize they'd get the opposite reaction, if anything.
Right. Did you find any connection between Saddam Hussein's regime and 9/11? I just want to be very clear on this because this has come up in numerous contexts. But did you find any connection between Saddam Hussein?
We weren't looking for that, but we found none.
Okay. And also, let me just be clear on this question because this, again, has come up in this committee and other places. Is there any evidence that Saddam Hussein or his regime passed WMD to al-Qaeda?
We saw nothing. And
is there any evidence that he attempted to do that or he was contemplating doing that?
We saw nothing.
Okay. And as I understand your testimony from earlier when we started in the very beginning, you talked about the UN sanctions. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as I understand it, in your view, they had a very limiting effect on his ability to produce WMD.
Among the effects of the sanctions were to constrain his ability to produce WMD. And that's twofold. One is that there were some constraints, particularly in the early years, about what he could import, but it also modified his behavior because his prime objective was to get rid of those sanctions.
So in that sense, the sanctions had worked or were working, but also what you found, as I understand it, is individuals and companies from China, Russia, France, and other countries were willingly evading UN sanctions.
I think the strength of the sanctions was clearly decaying, particularly after 1997.
I think you mentioned that they were in a free fall.
Well, I'm a skydiver, so free fall's not necessarily bad in my book.
Okay. Well, let me ask this:
let's hope not.
if China and Russia and France, if those companies and individuals were trading with Iraq, is it possible they could do that without their governments knowing that?
Yes.
And do you think
we try to be very careful in discussing when we know it was a company dealing with Iraq and when we know it was a government dealing with Iraq or when we know it was a government-sponsored company dealing with Iraq? We saw evidence of all.
Okay. And were these violations by these, this governments and companies and individuals, et cetera, were these violations aiding Saddam Hussein's attempted buildup of WMD? Were they aiding his WMD program?
They were certainly aiding his weapons infrastructure. They were certainly aiding his long-range ballistic missile capability. They were certainly aiding in the sense that the domestic infrastructure was improving, and that would shorten a breakout capability should he decide on that. But we did not see specific imports, for example, related to a biological program, dedicated to a biological program, or dedicated to a nuclear program, or dedicated to a chemical program.
I see. Now, I want to ask you a question that I know you'll get asked by the press if you hadn't already, and it's possible that you already have been asked this today. But President Bush, when he was asked whether there were chemical and biological weapons that existed in Iraq prior to Operation Iraqi Freedom, he said, "Wait until Charlie gets back with the final report." My first question is, are you Charlie?
If he says so.
Okay.
Yes.
And second question is just as I understand your testimony, again, to be clear, that you did not find evidence of chemical or biological weapons at the dawn of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
We did not find stocks of either chemical or biological weapons.
And is your report in any way inconsistent with David Kaye's findings?
No, I think, well, in some cases we refined some of the material he presented. We learned a bit more about some of the things that he originally found. We were able to flesh out some of the organizations, and for example, he first found some of these Mukhabarat labs, and I think we were able to get a better understanding of what they were about. It's more of a...
In other words, you fleshed out his report.
Well,
more
his report was really a snapshot of what they found.
Yeah.
I think this is more of a synthetic picture of what was going on.
Comprehensive view.
It's certainly not inconsistent with what he.
Okay, let me ask about a scenario that someone referred to a few moments ago, and you've actually have it in your written statement that at least is referred to. And maybe I should ask General McMenamin about this. There's a scenario out there that I think we in the Congress are concerned about. What if insurgents team up with Saddam Hussein regime chemical weapons experts? What if they team up and could cause quite a bit of damage there? Here's the question I want to ask the General. Do we have, in your view, sufficient resources on the ground in Iraq to prevent this?
I would say for the military commanders, the intelligence effort that we have to try to identify these people is sufficient at the moment. One of the more successful programs that the embassy is running is the Scientist Redirection Program. We're working with the embassy and the Ministry of Science and Technology to actually employ some of these former regime scientists either here in the United States or in Iraq, which will also help the issue.
Now, so I'm sorry, the answer to my question then is what? Do we have sufficient resources on the ground?
Yes, sir.
We do. Okay. Are we doing everything we can do to make sure that scenario doesn't happen?
Sir, anytime we get any notification of any type of chemical weapon, we send a team out. We interview sources. We run down sources. We've run down everything from epoxy glue to baby powder to crude schematic drawings of missile systems that somebody took out of a book just so they can get some money.
Right.
So we investigate every potential lead.